In this episode, we are discussing the 3 most common ways you block yourself from receiving. 3 ways that you block the thing, person, experience, or feeling that you are working to create right now. I'm not only going to point out the sneaky 3, but I'm going to give you an alternative practice for each so that you can reverse Uno ASAP and call in exactly what you want and fast. Let's go. Welcome to All In with Allie, the podcast for online business owners and entrepreneurs who are ready to create the life and business of their dreams. I am so happy you are here. Let's dive right in. So, receiving blockers. Receiving is simply receiving. It's getting the thing that you want. It's having the launch go as planned or even better. It's manifesting whatever it is that you are dreaming of creating. The receiving is the realizing that that thing that you want has taken place and that it is here now. That is receiving. And I'm bringing this up because this is one of the things that I talk through my clients through the most, right? I work with women who all in their own way, shape, and form are creating big lives and big businesses and are pursuing larger than average goals. And part of the equation of that is the receiving of it, is navigating the void or the lag or the gap that takes place from when you first decide, okay, I'm going to go for this goal, and you start pursuing it to when you're actually receiving it. There is a amount of time. And in my newest training, Exponential, which if you listen to the last episode, you can actually watch now for free. So we'll link that in the show notes. But in that training, I call this the lag. You have to know how to navigate that. And this is where all of the self-sabotage takes place. This is where somebody goes from being absolutely in alignment with what they want to very out of alignment of it because of usually one of these 3 things and actions and attitudes that we're going to cover in this episode. So everybody deals with this. I deal with this. And these 3, they're sneaky. They're insidious. A lot of times you don't even realize that you're doing it or that this is crept up on you. So hopefully you can listen to this. And if you know that you're doing one now or you catch it in the future, you can stop it. You can reverse course and put yourself back in alignment with what it is that you want to receive. So the first of these receiving blockers is what I call the glutton for punishment energy. And this used to be me. So what this is when you expect things or you expect anything that maybe requires you to do more than what you've done, you just naturally expect things in general to be, quote, hard, difficult, a lot of work, pain, sacrifice. That's the glutton for punishment. You just go into a situation expecting it to take from you and to require something of you that you don't necessarily want to give. And maybe you do. And maybe that's probably the glutton of it all. It's like, well, okay, this is going to be a lot, but let's go. And that's where it gets tricky. Because if you enjoy this, if you enjoy the process and you get some sort of sick kick out of creating a goal and then in a way relishing in the pain of it, that actually kind of works. And you see a lot of people do this. And I believe this is why hustle culture kind of got a bad rap, because not everybody relishes in that, but the people that do, they glamorize it and then kind of put out this vibe, or it's very easy to see that and assume that that has to be the same situation for everybody else. So at the end of the day, if you're enjoying yourself and you're genuinely having a good time, that is serving you in some way, for sure. So that's one thing. If you're enjoying it, it's like, okay, cool. Like, do you, I guess. But where you have to watch out for this is in the sustainment of this. Usually, this is not sustainable. So usually my clients who are gluttons for punishment, and again, this probably still is a little bit me. I still love a little bit of a grind. It makes me feel alive. It makes me feel like I've got traction going. So it's something to not necessarily like abandon or make yourself wrong for. We're not doing that. Again, if you're enjoying it, that's fine. But what tends to happen is there's a wall to that, right? You can only grind for so long, and then it gets to a point where you run out of steam. And then it becomes kind of like this stop go, like you gain a few feet and then you fall back a couple because you've pushed yourself past the limit. You reach the burnout point. That tends to happen. So what I have found with this, upon reflection of myself and with a lot of the clients that I work with who feel this way and who tend to dip into this a lot, going into a situation, expecting it to be really difficult and a lot of work, is either one, they grew up in an environment where this was demonstrated to them, right? Like if you had parents that worked their tails off, maybe, whether they made a good living or not, but it was ingrained and conditioned in you that hard work equals whatever it is that you want. Obviously, this gets into your psyche, and it's really easy to carry that into your own life and business. And or maybe you had an experience where you pursued something that you wanted really bad, and it required a ton of work from you, and it required a lot in terms of sacrifice, whatever that means, and you made it happen. So then you took that experience and you programmed it in your mind as universally true. Those tend to be the cases where this comes from. And I want to be so clear right now. I am a big fan of hard work. I'm a big fan of doing what's required. That's what I'm a big fan of, actually. So I used to say, and you see, I kind of just fell into that old way of thinking and that old pattern just a second ago. I'm a big fan of hard work, when that's not exactly it. I'm a big fan of rising to the occasion, whatever that means. That's what I'm a big fan of. I don't like when somebody says that they want a big goal, or they just say that they want a big goal, but then they're not willing to do what's required. Or as soon as they need to put themselves out of their comfort zone, or maybe there is some sort of short-term sacrifice required to get the thing, they back down, right? They're not willing to put in maybe the extra effort that may or may not be required, but they're just not willing to do it. I'm not a fan of that. So this whole podcast in general is not saying in any way, shape, or form that we're not fans of action and we're not fans of, that there's going to be things that you are called to do sometimes that may not be sustainable, or you may not have to do for everything else. But the point that I'm making here is there's a difference in saying, okay, this is required of me. I need to work a couple of weekends to make this thing happen. Or wow, that was that thing, that masterclass, putting myself out there in that way felt really difficult, but I got to the other side and that supported the goal that I was working on. There's a difference in that, understanding that it just depends on the job at hand or the situation at hand, versus everything you go to create, you automatically expect it to be Mount Everest that you're about to have to climb. Right? Big difference in those two. So why this is an issue and why this can block you from receiving is because you get what you expect. You find what it is that you look for. So if you go into every situation expecting it to be difficult, expecting it to be hard, you will find the ways where that's true and you will rise to that occasion. You will essentially make that happen. Instead of going into a situation saying, "Oh, here's a way to make it easier. Here's a way this could be more elegant. Here's a way that I could actually create this faster. Here's a shortcut that doesn't reduce the efficacy of whatever it is that, right? That to you doesn't even occur. You automatically walk into the room. How can I make this more difficult than it needs to be? What in this situation is going wrong right now? Instead of, let's find ways that we can make it right. What is going absolutely wrong that can give my mind something to obsess negatively about? That is the receiving blocker of it all. That is where we have an issue. So here's what I want you to do instead. One of my favorite breakthroughs, and I've shared this on the podcast, but I was listening to a podcast where Rick Ross was being interviewed. I love me some Rick Ross. And he kept saying the same phrase again and again and again because they were asking him about his life and they were asking him about these incredible accomplishments that he's made over the course of his career and these situations that seemed insurmountable that he ended up making happen, right? And he said this phrase over and over and over again in this episode. And it dawned on me. I was like, bro, that is a vibe. That is an attitude. That is a lifestyle right there. That is a whole frequency. That is a wave. And the phrase that he kept saying again and again and again was too easy. They're like, Rick Ross, you were in jail for this long, and then you came out and you immediately, you wrote, you're this while you were in jail, and you were this, what, you accomplished this, you won these awards. He was like, too easy, too easy, too easy. And he wasn't saying it necessarily in a like braggadocious way of like, yeah, whatever. You could tell it was from this energy of like, yeah, and what else was I going to do? This is who I am. This is like too easy, yeah, that is very, very rare. Nobody else has done that. You've never heard of anybody else doing that, but to me, too easy. And it is an absolute, to me, breakthrough game changer. Because again, you can tell, like, if you just adopt that attitude, or like, I just make crazy shit happen. This is just who I am. To the average person, that is difficult. To the average person, that is a lot. To the average person, they have to sacrifice the time for, or whatever. But to me, it's just who I am. It's what I do. It's too easy. It comes natural. That automatically, it just takes away the whole option of how can I make this automatically hard? It's like, if this were easy for me, if this came naturally to me, how would I approach this situation? I am absolutely obsessed. And I will do this anytime that, I go to sit down to create something that feels big, that feels scary or difficult or whatever. I will catch myself saying, okay, too easy, too easy. It's just like, it's almost like shaking off the habitual feeling of doom that sometimes we carry with us when we go into a new situation or anything that we're creating, right? If you're building an online business and you're doing it in a similar way that I am, we're consistently putting ourselves out of our comfort zones and trying new things, right? When you're creating content, when you're creating new trainings, when you're creating new offers, when you're working with new people, when you are up-leveling in any way, shape, or form, these are different bars that you're setting for yourself that you've never been before. So again, if you are a glutton for punishment and everything is so complicated and difficult, you can feel the weight of that. And it's the antithesis of receiving. Receiving is more of a leaning back, like this is just who I am. Of course it's going to come to me. Expecting things to be hard and difficult, not so much. Not so much. So practice more of and try and adopt a more of a too easy attitude if that resonates with you. And if that doesn't, or you want to do something additional, pray on it. Pray for proof. Ask whoever you pray to, God, universe, Mother Nature, whoever, show me how this can be easier. Show me proof of how I can receive without the grind of it all. And then look for proof. It is there. It is there. You can walk into any room or situation and find examples of how things are working out for you and how things aren't working out for you. Duality is in everything. This is all about how we've been trained and conditioned to look for one certain side of the spectrum. The whole spectrum's present. You've just been focusing on the difficult side. Thus, that's what you find. Thus, that's what you experience. And it's blocking your receiving. So that's the first way that we block. The second way that we block our receiving and limit what eventually comes through in terms of what we're creating is grasping too tight, having too firm of a grip on what it is that we want or we think we want, over obsessing at the expense of the rest of your experience. This will block you from receiving. And the reason why is because first, you're telling yourself a story that if this thing doesn't happen, something bad will. Otherwise, you wouldn't be grasping that tight. You wouldn't. If you just wanted, if you're like, I think that would be great, you would be able to surrender a bit more, right? But usually the over gripping happens when you've absolutely told yourself and convinced yourself that if this thing doesn't happen in this way, something negative will take place. I'm either not good enough or there's going to be this chain reaction of negative events. Therefore, I have to hang on for dear life and obsess because that makes me feel like I am in control of the greater magic and story that's taken place and unfolding in front of me. Also, if you catch yourself doing this, especially often, this tends to also mean that you believe you're less than what it is that you're creating, or you believe that unless this thing happens, you aren't good enough. So when we attach our worth into our goals, into our business, and it's very easy to do, very easy to do. I think this is one of the harder, more difficult, but we're going to change that, right? We're changing it now to this is the easiest thing for us to do. But until we do that, this is one of the more difficult things that I think a lot of entrepreneurs deal with, or at least entrepreneurs who have a forward-facing brand and who have a lot of colleagues in the same industry or a similar type of business, because what you see is you see a lot of people flaunting their accomplishments and what they're working toward and the things that they are doing, or that comparison can really chip away and affect how it is that you see yourself. Unless this money comes through, unless this client signs up, unless I have this level launch, or I hit this level of revenue, then I'm not as good as this person, or I'm not as good as I think I am. This is a losing battle. This is not the game that you want to play, I promise you. Because entrepreneurship, as we've talked about ad nauseum, is an up and down, right? It's a constant wave, right? It's always going to ebb and flow. So if your self-worth is attached to your performance and your limited results in that moment, which mean nothing, right? Because it's not taking into account the compound effect. It's not taking into account anything else. But this snapshot of this moment, your worth is dictated by whatever is happening. Then your worth is going to be constantly in question, constantly. That's exhausting. And that speaks to a much greater issue, right? Because it questions, you're questioning your own worth. You're tying your worth into something that is so beneath you, that's so far removed from your worth, and you're marrying the two. So this tells us there's a lot of lack and there's a lot of scarcity there too, which what's a match for that? Which is why that blocks your receiving. So when you do this and you're grasping too tight and you're over obsessing, you're limiting you, number one, and what's possible. We think we know how something should go from our very limited vantage point. So you've heard the saying, you can't see the forest for the trees. It's because when you are in one spot in a forest, you can only see a very small radius around you. You don't know the bigger picture, said another way. So when you are obsessing and trying to over control a situation, you're essentially saying, I know what's best for me and for the greater good than God. I know more than God in this situation. Which, come on, we know that's not the case. We know that's not the case. But you don't even realize you're doing this, but that's what you're doing. So you're limiting yourself, because then you're blocking all of the other options that could happen that could be just as good, if not better, because it's coming from a higher vantage point. Again, this speaks to you simply don't believe that the thing will happen. Otherwise, you wouldn't be obsessing over it. Also, this shows that you have a warped perception of time. We perceive time as linear, but that does not mean that time is linear. So when you're putting such a strict timeline on yourself to the point that you are obsessing, it's a fallacy. Time does not exist in the eyes of the divine. So your thing could be so close to coming, but because it didn't come at this very specific time, then you block it with all of your resistance and all of your issues with your own self-worth. And then you say, well, I guess I'm not good enough for this. I guess I'm this. I guess I'm that. I guess it's not going to happen. And the universe is like, well, okay. It was about to be there, but guess you don't want it. I guess you don't want it. But at the end of the day, you get what you are. You get what you believe. You get what you are, and you get what you believe. So if you believe you are not good enough for that thing because it hasn't happened yet, or if you don't believe it's coming because it hasn't yet, or because it's taking too long, or it's not happening in the way that from your very limited vantage point you think it should happen, that's the vibe you're putting out. Not good enough, not happening, not good enough, not happening. It's repelling, it's repelling, it's repelling. I also think there's a greater spiritual reason for this too. Because if you go for a big goal, right? Like let's say every time you pursue any kind of goal, you over obsess to the point that, again, it takes away from the rest of your life. You over obsess and you try and control, and you have this grip to where it's all you can think about. You're not being present with the rest of your family, friends, whatever. You keep yourself holed up in a room, or you're overworking, you're overdoing, right? You're over in that masculine energy to the point that you don't allow yourself to pay attention to the other just as important, if not more important, facets of your life. Imagine if God let you win in that moment, right? Imagine if God, like, let's say you are doing what I just outlined, and then the goal happened and you made it happen. And then you programmed in your mind, okay, the only way that I can be successful is if this is the only thing I focus on. that I sacrifice the rest of my life and the things and people that I love. That's the only way I can be successful. This does happen, right? And I don't think it's because God hates the people that he lets that happen to, but I believe that sometimes it can be part of your life experience to learn that lesson. So I think there are different ways that some of us experience this. Some of us experience this where we do get the success, and then we have to kind of work backwards and realize, oh, wow, that's actually not the point of life. And you have to do the work that way. And some of us don't get the success until we learn the lesson, and then it unlocks for us. I just think I'm only speculating, right? Who knows? But I think that's why you see different people have different experiences with this. But I think, again, if you allow yourself to even more deeply condition your mind that sabotaging your life experience is required to be successful, that is a problem. And that will be a never-ending story that obviously can ruin your life. Where you look back, you're like, what the hell? I have all this money, and where are the people that I love? You hear stories about that a lot. That's not what we want. And it doesn't have to happen like that, right? That's the point. We get to create, and I'm going to say the B word, balanced businesses and lives. It's not going to be a perfect balance. There's going to be skews here and there where you work a little bit more in this season, a little less in this season. That's balance, right? That is possible. But again, you get what you look for. All of these are habits that you can break, but you have to allow yourself to practice a different option and prove that one to be true for you too, so that you can say, oh, okay, both can be true. I prefer this one. And then you get to make that choice intentionally and consciously. So here's what we're going to do instead. If you are somebody who tends to over control, over obsess, and grasp too tight to what you're working on, what I want you to do is I want you to play out the worst case scenario in your mind. Go there. I have clients do this all the time where they're freaking out about a launch. And I'm like, okay, so what? Let's say that does happen. Talk me through what happens if you don't hit this goal, or whatever it is that you're working toward doesn't happen. What happens? And the worst part of what happens is they're disappointed. That's the worst part. Sometimes there's like, I really do need this money. But it's like, there's always, every single time, there's always some sort of, but we could make it work. You're not going to be homeless. You're not going to be on the street. You're going to still be able to eat. Your kids are still going to be able to eat. But when we don't go there and play out the worst case scenario, what happens is in your mind, it feels so much scarier than what it actually is. Failure feels like that terrifying monster under the bed. But then when you look under the bed, it's actually like a tiny little mouse. That's what that is. We can befriend failure. Did you know that? Failure is actually not a bad thing. It shows that you actually went for something that was difficult. That in entrepreneurship is something to actually be proud of and celebrate. But unfortunately, we make failure mean something way more scary and negative than it needs to. But if we look at it and actually shed light on what it is you're so scared of, you realize there's actually not much to be scared of other than, well, that would suck. I'd be disappointed. Okay. Can we live with disappointment? I hope so, because you're an entrepreneur. It's going to be part of the situation sometimes, right? We'll survive. You are a lot stronger than some temporary disappointment. So when we can shed light on it, it's like, oh, okay. Automatically, like just saying that out loud, I felt my own shoulders relax. It's like, okay, I'm actually not going to die. I'm actually not going to be put on the street. My family actually won't hate me. I'm actually not less than somebody else just because this didn't play out exactly how I thought it should in this moment, in this very particular time. So look at it. Another trick that I actually just learned from a client who was an Olympic level swimmer, but she was getting coached on this, and she was taught to actually rehearse the worst case scenario. Now, when I heard this, my automatic thought goes to, why would you do that? Because you get what you focus on. Okay? You get what you expect. So in my mind, it's that wouldn't make sense to me. But when you talk it through, it does make sense, right? And the point is we don't want to spend too much time doing this, right? But the point of this is to prepare you. The point of this is to not be caught so far off guard that you end up self-sabotaging. We want to be prepared in the same way that, God forbid, something happened in your home. You hopefully are prepared for that, right? You hopefully have a fire extinguisher in your home. Maybe you have a security system in your home. Maybe you have some sort of weapon in your home to protect your family. That's not you necessarily obsessing or expecting the worst case. It's simply you being responsible and prepared if, God forbid, things were to pop off. This is an exact same situation. So rehearse, think about, okay, let's say that thing does happen. The thing that I'm so scared of, let's say that does happen. How am I going to respond to that? How am I going to behave? Here's a better way to say it. How am I going to lead through that situation if that were how this goes? Now you have an action plan. Hopefully you never have to do it, but if you're in that situation, you get to lead versus sabotage. This is what creates an absolute boss in business. Because there are going to be failures. There are going to be times that things pop off, that things happen that aren't ideal, but you're a business owner. You're in a life experience. Life is going to life. Business is going to business. Entrepreneurship is going to ebb and flow. So when you can come to a situation with a level head, because you're not so far caught off guard, you get to lead and not be pushed backwards because of that. So you're going to play through it. You realize, oh, that's not a monster. That's a mouse. I can handle a mouse. I've dealt with way worse than that. We're going to be okay. Here's how I'm going to lead through that situation. And then we get to let it go and move on with our lives. Now it's not taking up so much real estate in your mind. Your fear is a good thing. This is your brain showing you, I'm doing what I was designed to do. You're welcome. But when we try and avoid fear altogether, and not only that, but we make it the enemy, we're simply saying like, hey, healthy brain, you suck. You're doing exactly. So befriend it. Say, oh, thank you, brain, for doing your job. I love that about you. Let's look at that. Oh, look, brain, see, actually, we're going to be okay. Actually, that's not as big as we're making it seem. So thank you. Crisis averted. I know how I'm going to handle it. And then automatically it's just like you've released that energy and it's not being built up inside of you, waiting around every corner because it probably won't go away. So deal with it. Another thing that I would recommend you do if you find yourself over controlling and obsessing and gripping too tight is some of that self-worth and identity work. If you are telling yourself a story that you are only as good as your last launch, or you're only as good as your current year or last year in business, or the current client who is or isn't saying yes to you, or whatever, I don't think I need to get into why this is an issue. We've already discussed that, and it's pretty obvious. And then finally, the last tip that I would give you for this particular one is literally let the thing go. Let it go. If it's making you that crazy and you're able, sometimes this is easier said than done, but literally like visualize yourself Do an actual practice where you're like holding the goal and you literally open your hand and let go, let God. Let this be a practice in strengthening your faith and your relationship with the divine, that everything is always working out for you. Because when has it not? If you are still sitting here breathing, listening to this podcast, everything has always worked out for you. In hindsight, give me one time where it hasn't. Give me one time where you can look back in hindsight where something that went a different way than you had originally anticipated, that you didn't look back in hindsight, you say, actually, you know what? Okay, I don't hate that. Every time. But in the moment, we forget. We temporarily forget. And then finally, the number 3, or the third way that we limit our receiving and sometimes full on block it, is by doing too much. Literally an overuse of our masculine energy and not utilizing the MVP of the equation, which is our feminine. Both actually equally important, but what you'll find is somebody will tend to gravitate toward one and not the other, and kind of misuse or barely use it all of the other. This is me. I'm way more comfortable in my masculine. I'm way more comfortable doing. I am pure Manny Jen. When it comes to action, consider it done. Times 10. Like, that is where I'm most comfortable. Where I'm the least comfortable is in my feminine. Actually, I joked about this at my rare retreat, which we had a couple weeks ago. We were talking about this. I can't even remember the exact context of what we were talking about, but I was like, I will literally try and make my rest productive. That is how more in my masculine I am. I will try and make rest productive, right? Like when I'm chilling, relaxing on the weekends, maybe I can watch a documentary that motivates me, or maybe I can listen to binaural beats, or I don't know, or like I'll get a massage that's meant to like, I don't know, just like very rarely. I do, of course, sometimes relax, but rarely is it from a place of like true rotting. The concept of just like rotting, where it's just like there's no rhyme or reason. We're just like, we're literally just dying here on the bed or the couch or whatever. That to me it's more uncomfortable. I'm more comfortable in the opposite. Okay. So here's why this can be an issue. Feminine energy is receptive mode. That's what that is. That is the true receiving mode, is when you're in your feminine. You've done the work. You've done what I called in exponential, the ordering. You've put the order in. Now it's like, okay, I've done the thing. Now I'm going to fully trust, fully lean back, and know that it's on its way. It is a deep surrender and trust. That is feminine energy. Masculine is giving mode. I'm going to give the order, I'm going to put it out, and I'm going to do the action. So in a way, this is kind of similar to the glutton for punishment one, in that typically a lot of us adopt more of a geared towards one energy versus the other because of what we saw growing up, right? A lot of us millennials, we saw our parents do the typical 9 to 5 thing. We heard, until people were blue in the face, say, if you want to earn money, you have to work hard, right? And attach so much meaning to working hard and doing and doing and doing. We also came up in the peak of hustle culture, or at least like on the internet, right? With all the Gary V's, where it's just like, hustle your face off, don't stop, can't stop, won't stop. So that's usually where this comes from for a lot of us, or we've bought into the fallacy that more work, more effort, more action equals more results. It can be true, but it's not universally true. It's not always true. And as a matter of fact, when you can master both energies, you tend to blow your mind as to what's possible because you're making yourself more open to the receptivity, to the receptive nature. More can get through because you're not blocking it with constantly doing. So I want you to picture there's like, I don't know, like there's a tube, right? Like your action is like pushing things through the tube. And on the other side of the tube, there's water trying to come through, right? Like water that you're trying, like let's say you're trying to work for water. So you're pushing something through to get to the water, or I don't know. This is not a good. This is so stupid. Go with me though. Okay, go with me. It's not the best example. But your action is like you're pushing something through and the thing is trying to come through back to where you are on the other side, but you keep pushing things through. So you're literally blocking the water. If you would just stop pushing and doing, then the water would be able to come through the other side. This is so stupid. It makes sense if you don't think about it. It makes sense if you don't think about it. Okay. Pretend that made sense. That's feminine energy. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Anyway, all right. Anyway, here's the issue here. Here's the issue, because you get it. This does create results. This is the one that could be really confusing because hustle culture, doing action, taking action is required. Action in alignment of that which you want is absolutely required to create the thing. You're not going to just sit in a room and meditate your way to the business that you want. So this will create results, but the issue is it's not sustainable and you are limiting the amount that can come through. You are limiting because you're not leaving enough space to let the ideas and the bigger results come. You're blocking it with that pushing, that energy, that move, that action energy. This also points to a lack of self-worth because you're relying so heavily on action and not on your energy, right? You're saying like, I do not believe in my ability to attract that client, that result without the overuse of action. I'm not worthy of this on my own. I can't just receive it. And again, action's going to be required. So this is kind of, it is a more difficult one to understand, but it's not action that we have an issue with. It's the overaction, the over masculine. If you're never allowing yourself the space, or rarely, or we're not even looking for rare, we're looking for a pretty decent balance of masculine versus feminine. And if you are overly skewed to one side, it's going to affect your results for sure. So what we want to do instead is, again, let's have a plan of action. Let's have a plan of action. So my new favorite way to do launches is I try to, in the best of my ability, get as much of the quote action done as early as possible in the launch. So I'm not a big fan of scheduling a bunch of things. That's not really how I work. But again, like in the earlier days of a launch, let's say I'm doing a two-week launch or something, I will try and get either me or my team do as much of the actions in the first few days or maybe even first week or so that for the rest of the launch, I can be more in the receptive, receiving mode. And I'm not constantly like doing. That's really helpful for me. So you can either do it and then walk away, or even better, put a team in place, put somebody in place that can support you so that you can really be more in your femme and not so much in that masculine energy. And then the last tip that I would give for this is make a game of this. So maybe don't practice this right out the gate unless you want to with these bigger launches that you feel like there's more on the line for you. Do it with smaller things. Make this a fun game where you can test and play with the universe and with God a little bit. And you can say, okay, God, show me how easy it is to receive. Show me how I've already done enough in my business, there's enough to create a compound effect. There's enough where those sales actually can come through while I'm sleeping or while I'm in the bath or whatever. Pray on this, ask for this, and then look for it. You will find ways. And the signs are going to look like like a reel, all of a sudden getting engagement that you posted a few weeks ago, or somebody purchasing something that you posted a while ago, or somebody discovering your website and coming out of the woodwork that you've never had a conversation with. These are all signs and proof of how this can work. Your job is now to build your belief more in those things and the ability of those things taking place versus having to physically control and create via your limited and linear action. That is what we're trying. We want to fix that imbalance to where, not saying, again, I love taking action. So like if somebody said the goal is to never take action, I'd be miserable. And then that would hurt my results. So that's not necessarily the goal. It can be for some people. Some people really love the idea of creating a fully sustainable, passive business. By all means, that's absolutely possible. But either way, whatever attracts you most, we're looking for more of that balance. There's that action piece, but then there's also the feminine, receptive, trust, surrender, belief in a greater good, in a greater possibility, and that everything truly is working out for you. That is faith. Okay? I hope this was helpful for you. If so, I would love and be so thrilled if you left us a 5-star review and some nice words, or just a 5-star review on iTunes, and or took a screenshot and shared this in your stories. It really is so helpful. Thank you for listening, and I will see you here next week. Bye.